Hello, once again, you are welcome to Kodance Academy, and I am Samuel Ando Boche. You remember last week when we met, we created a Python program, to be specific, a program that is able to add two numbers for us. But we encountered a particular program where the interpreter, instead of adding the numbers for us, the interpreter gave us 23 as an answer. Let me run the program again to confirm that this is what we got. So on the terminal, if you can't find your terminal, you can press Ctrl Shift and then back tick on your keyboard to bring the terminal. So on the terminal, let us bring back the code or that particular program we created. So I will type code, then the name of that particular Python program, calc.py. Press enter and then bring it back. So this is the Python program we created, and this program was supposed to allow the user to enter two numbers and then at the end of the day add the numbers for us. So let me run the code again. So type Python calc.py, press enter, then it prompted for the first number. So I type 2 and then press enter again, prompted for the second number, type 3, press enter, and then this is the problem we encountered. Instead of adding the number 2 plus 3 and then giving us 5, the interpreter was giving us 23. So how do we actually handle this particular problem? Now, in order to handle this problem, let us turn our attention and then look at what is called data types. Data types. Now, it turns out that in programming, we deal with so many types of data, or we handle different kinds of data. So these different kinds of data that we handle inside our program or inside our code are known as what? Data types. So the data type actually refers to the kind of data that we are manipulating. The kind of data we have at hand as programmers also determine the kind of operations that can be performed on that particular data. What do I mean by this? This is to tell us that every type of data or every kind of data that we have at hand comes with its own behavior. So yes, every data type has its own behavior that it demonstrates, and then the kind of operations that can be performed on such data type. So what are these data types I'm talking about? So the first one we will talk about is a data type known as as str. The full pronunciation is a string, but in programming we shorten it as as str. Str. Anything we put inside either single or double quotation mark becomes a string. So the key word I'm using over here is anything, whether number, whether alphabet, so anything at all. If we put it inside either single or double quotation mark, it becomes a string. So to go back to the input function, technically the input function takes a string argument. So the argument we pass to the input function to prompt the user on the kind of data they are supposed to type is also a string data type. Why? Because we put it inside double quotation mark. It can either be single or double quotation mark. So if you put anything inside single or double quotation mark, it becomes a string data type. The other data type that we have is a data type known as float, or floating point value. Now, float also refers to the numbers that we write them with dots inside. So any number that has dot within it is is a floating point value, or in simple terms, float. So example is 3.12 or negative 4.561. We have a whole lot of them. So either negative or positive number, if that number has dot within it, it belongs to the float data type. So the float data type is the number we write them with dot within. Now the other data type is the integer, also shortened as as int, int. Now we have seen that the float data type has to do with the numbers we write them with dot inside. Now integer on the other hand are the numbers that we write them without any dot. So example is 12. Another example is negative 14. So all the numbers that we write them without using dot are all integer data types. So the numbers that we write them without, I'm repeating without. So it means that these numbers, we just write them without using what? Any point. And then floats, on the other hand, are the numbers that we write them with dot. So if the number is having a dot inside, it is float data type. If it has no dot inside, it's what? It's integer data type. In short, we say int data type, INT. So far we have mentioned 3 data types, which are the string, that is anything that we put inside either single or double quotation mark. And then we have mentioned float, the numbers that are having dots within, they are all known as what? Float data type. Then the last one we have mentioned among the 3 is what? Is the integer data type, shortened as int, which also has to do with the opposite of float, writing numbers with dot inside. With the integer here, the numbers that are not having dot inside. In some books, they will say that integer refers to positive or negative what? Whole numbers. So integer values are what? Are the whole numbers. Numbers, we write them without using dot. So the float and the integer data types are all number data type, or they are all numbers. So you agree with me that with numbers, we can perform some operations on them. And what are these operations that we can perform on what? On numbers. With numbers, we are able to add numbers, we are able to subtract numbers, we are able to divide numbers, we are able to multiply numbers. And then with the last operator you see over there, in the normal world, we classify this as the percentage sign. But in programming, it doesn't stand for the percent sign, it stands for what is known as what? A modulus. And this operator is able to take 2 numbers, divide them, and then instead of returning the quotient to us, it rather returns the remainder of the 2 numbers to us. So with numbers, float, integer, we are able to what? To add them. So we can add, we can subtract, we can divide, we can multiply, and then we can also find, using the modulus operator in this case, to get the remainder of what? Of 2 numbers. So with integer and then floating point values, these operators work perfectly without having any issues. But when it comes to the string data type, we can add strings and then we can also multiply strings. But in adding strings, instead of performing the normal addition that we know in mathematics, strings perform what is known as what? Concatenation. Strings performs concatenation. Concatenation has to do with you joining 2 or more what? Strings together. Remember, we have said strings are the values that we put inside either single or double quotation mark. So what is happening here is that by default, the input function returns string data type. So when we add strings, I have said that instead of performing the normal addition we know in mathematics, it doesn't actually perform real calculation or addition of the numbers, but rather it concatenates what? The numbers, joining the numbers on top of what? Of each other. And that is what is happening over here when we run this particular program. So enter first number, I enter 2. The input function returns to me is what? A string data type. Though I am entering number, but the return type is what? Is string. So when I press enter again and then I enter 3, what is being returned is what? Is the string data type. So therefore, instead of performing addition in mathematics, it is performing concatenation, that is adding the numbers on top of each other, because the interpreter sees the 2 and the 3 as what? As not integers that will be able to perform the real calculation, but rather as strings. So that is the reason why we are seeing 23 instead of what? Of 5. So the input function is always returning string data type. So the numbers we type, the sentence we type, anything we type, by default is returned as string data type. So how do we then solve this problem? Now, in solving this problem, Python has provided us with what? With something known as what? Casting. Now, casting has to do with picking one data type and then you convert it into another data type. So example, I can pick a string data type and then through casting change its data type to become integer data type or to become int data type. The same way I can also pick int value and then through casting convert it to become what? Floating point value or to become a float data type. Python has provided us with functions that we can use to perform these operations. So in order for the calculations to actually work, we are supposed to to convert the string that is being returned from the input function into either floating point value or into integer before we actually add the numbers. So what are these? We have what? String function that we can use to convert the other data types to string data type, and then we also have the integer function that we can use to convert other data types to integer data type, and then we also have float function as well that we can use to convert from other data types into the float data type, and then we have the bool function. We haven't spoken about the bool function, and that is what we are going to talk about right after this exercise. So yes, these are the functions that we can make use of them to convert from one data type to the other. And then remember, I have said that converting from one data type to other data type refers to a term known as as casting. Let's go back to our text editor, and then after taking the numbers, before we actually add the numbers together, let us use the int function to convert the numbers that are being returned from the input function to integers before we actually add them. So before the number 1, I will type int, bracket open, and then close the bracket here. So I have int, and then I have put the number that is the variable that contains the first number. Then when I come to the second one, I will do the same thing, int, bracket open, and then bracket close. So here, what are we doing? We prompt the user to enter first number. The first number is saved inside a variable known as number 1. Then we again prompt the user to enter second number. That second number is also saved inside a variable named as number 2. And then after that, we create another variable called add, which stores the sum of number 1 and then number 2. And because by default the input function returns string data type, we need to use the int function to convert it from being string to integer before we can actually add. Other than that, the interpreter will perform what is called concatenation. So we use the int function, and then we pass the number 1 to it, and then we use the int function again, and then we pass number 2 to it. And now let me run this version of our code. So on the terminal, let me clear it and then type python calc.py. Press enter. It prompts me to type my first number. Now I can type 2, press enter again. It prompts me to type the second number, type 3, press enter, and now I believe it will be able to add it for us. So now we are seeing the 5. So understand that by default, the input function is always returning string data type, and then with strings, we cannot add them, but we can perform what is called concatenation. So therefore, the interpreter was concatenating and not actually performing addition for us. We can as well directly pass the input function to the int function. And how do we actually do this? So permit me to clear this line of code and then write number 1 plus number 2. And then I will rather pass this whole sentence to the int function. So I cut that particular sentence. And then after introducing the int function, I pass that whole sentence to the int function as its what? Argument. And then do the same thing for the second statement. Cut it and then pass the whole sentence to the what? To the int function. And then this one will also work perfectly. So what is happening here? First of all, when the interpreter sees this line of code, it will go into the int function. Look at what is there. It sees the input what? Function over there. Runs the input function, permitting the user to type anything they want. And then whatever they type is passed to what? To the int function as its argument. Convert it into what? Into integer data type or into int, and then moves to the next line, perform the same action or operation, and then when it gets to what? To line 3, we have already converted both what? Numbers to integer. So this time round, it should be able to what? To add the two numbers for us. Now let me run this version of our code. Python calc.py. Press enter and then prompted for our number. I press 2, press enter again. I type 3, press enter, and then we still have our 5. So having looked at all this concept, let us create a program that is able to take temperature in degrees Celsius and then convert it to Fahrenheit. Every program we have out there and all the programs that we are going to develop or create throughout this course, we will follow some steps. And these steps are like guides to follow to create those programs. So the steps we follow to create these programs refers to a term known as what? Algorithm. So algorithm refers to the step-by-step instructions that you and I, the developers, must follow in order to create what? Programs that are useful and then functional. So in creating this particular temperature converter that is converting from degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit, we are supposed to follow these steps over here. So what is the first step? The first step is that we are supposed to take the temperature in degrees Celsius, and then after taking the temperature in degrees Celsius, there is a formula that has already been provided that we use to convert temperature that has been taken or expressed in degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit. So after taking the temperature in degrees Celsius, then step 2 comes in to say that use the formula to convert to Fahrenheit. So what is the formula? This is the formula that we use to convert from degrees Celsius to what? To Fahrenheit. And the formula says that if we want to convert from degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit, we need to take the temperature in degrees Celsius, multiply it by 9 divided by 5, and then whatever result we get, we add 32 to it. So this is the formula that has been provided to us whenever we want to convert to Fahrenheit. So after using the formula to convert to the Fahrenheit, then the step 3 comes in to say that we must now display the result to the user for them to be able to see. So the first step says that take the temperature in degrees Celsius. The second step says that use the formula to convert to Fahrenheit. And then the third step says that display the result to the user. So let's go back to the text editor. And then let me press Ctrl Shift backtick to bring my terminal or the command prompt. And then on that command prompt, let's create a new Python file to create this what? Degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit converter. So I will type code and then FAH, because we are converting from degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit. I have chosen FAH as my Python file what? Name. So you can also choose any file name at all. .py. Our Python file must always end with the .py extension. So having typed this code, I press enter to create my Python file. So now that the file has been created, now the first step says that we are supposed to take the temperature in degree Celsius. And then what Python function do we use to allow the user to be able to type something from the keyboard into the program? And we all know that with this, we make use of what? Of the input function. So I will type input, bracket open. We want the user to type the temperature in degrees Celsius. So let's prompt the user to enter temperature in degrees Celsius. So enter temperature in degree Celsius. So the input function is going to return to us whatever the user will type. So therefore, we must save this data or value inside a variable. So permit me to use a variable called Celsius and then equal whatever the user will type. We also know that the input function returns string data type whenever we use it. The temperature expressed in degrees Celsius is always in float. So example is 32.20 or maybe 27.92. So therefore, if the temperature in degrees Celsius is being expressed in float, then we must convert whatever the input function is going to return to us to float data type, so that we can successfully perform the operation without having any problem. So permit me, we also learned that we can pass a whole function to another function as its argument. So permit me to use the float function here, bracket open, and then pass the input function to the float function. So what is this line of code going to do? When the interpreter says float bracket open, input bracket open, quote, enter temperature in degrees Celsius, colon, space, quote, bracket close, it will first of all enter into the float function and then see the input function over there, run the input function, and then permit the user to type the degree Celsius, and then pass this degree Celsius that the user is going to type to the float function for the float function to also convert it into the float data type, so that we will be able to successfully perform the operation that we want to perform. After taking and then converting the degree Celsius to float, now the second step says that after taking the temperature in degrees Celsius, use the formula to convert to Fahrenheit. And then the formula that we are using is Fahrenheit is equal to bracket open Celsius multiply by 9 divided by 5, bracket close, plus 32. So having saved the Celsius in a variable called Celsius, so let's create another variable called Fahrenheit. So Fahrenheit is equal to, and then bracket open, we use bracket to group operations that we want to perform first. So it's just like using board mass. So board mass, brackets always first. We want the interpreter to first operate on the on the operation or the expressions that are within the bracket first before it adds the 32 to it. So we use the bracket to tell the interpreter that perform this expression within the bracket first, or perform these operations in the bracket first before adding whatever we want to add or anything to it. So inside the bracket, that is where we pass the Celsius. So Celsius multiplied by 9 divided by 5, and in performing division, we know that we use the division operator. So 9 divided, that's the / by 5. Then after this, we add 32 to it. So plus 32. So what is this line of code also doing? So we create a variable called Fahrenheit, and then inside this variable called Fahrenheit, we save the calculations from Celsius being multiplied by 9 divided by 5, and then adding 32 to it. The result, whatever it will result to, we save this result inside the variable Fahrenheit. After converting the degree Celsius to Fahrenheit, now the last step says that we are supposed to display the result to the user. So how do we display result to the user? With Python, displaying result to the user on the terminal, we use the print function. So print bracket open bracket close, and then we pass the Fahrenheit variable, because that is where the interpreter is saving our results to. So we pass, so permit me to use the temperature in Fahrenheit is, then we know that we can pass multiple arguments to the print function. So let me separate it by comma, and then pass Fahrenheit to it. So what is this line of code doing? After allowing the user to enter the temperature in degrees Celsius, we convert it to float. And then after converting it to float, we save the result inside a variable called Celsius. And then on line 2, That is where we are performing the operation, that is converting from degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit, and then whatever result we get, we save it inside the variable called Fahrenheit, and then on line 3 we print the result to the user saying that the temperature in Fahrenheit is whatever the result will be. Now, having finished this code, let's go back to the terminal to test how the program will respond. So on the terminal, let's type Python, and then the file name, the name of my file is fah.py. Press enter, and then it prompts us to enter temperature in degree Celsius. So let me enter 32.6, and then when I press enter, I should see 32.6 in Fahrenheit. So press enter, and then it says the temperature in Fahrenheit is 90.68. Let me rerun this code again by typing Python fah.py, run it again, and now I can type 37.4, press enter, and then it tells me the temperature in Fahrenheit is 99.32.